August 3rd, 1943, Sicily, Italy. General Patton walked into a military hospital tent. He was visiting his wounded soldiers, men who had been shot, shelled, burned, men who had given everything. Then he saw him, Private Charles Cool, 18 years old, sitting on a cot. No visible wounds, no bandages, no injuries. Patton stared at him. "What's wrong with you?" The private looked up. "I guess I just can't take it anymore, sir." What happened next would destroy Patton's career, create the biggest scandal of the war, and fill a mailroom in Washington with 3,000 letters. Some of them would make Patton weep. Others would make him furious. But what he did with all of them would reveal who he really was. Before we continue, make sure you subscribe. We tell the World War II stories that show the truth behind the legend. Patton looked at Cool for a long moment. The Sicily campaign had been brutal. 38 days of fighting in summer heat, men dying every hour. And here was a soldier with no wounds, sitting on a bed. Something snapped inside him. He reached out, slapped Cool across the face, called him a coward, threatened to shoot him himself. The doctors watched in stunned silence. The nurses froze. Nobody moved. Patton turned to the medical officer. "Don't you ever admit this yellow bastard? He's not sick. There's nothing wrong with him. I won't have the hospitals cluttered up with these sons of bitches who haven't got the guts to fight." He walked out. What Patton didn't know, what nobody told him in that moment, was that Private Cool had a fever of 0.24, that he was suffering from malaria, and from something that had no name yet in 1943, something we now call PTSD. But in 1943, the Army called it shell shock, battle fatigue, or the word Patton used, cowardice. 7 days later, it happened again. Private Paul Bennett, 21 years old, 4 years of service. His battery had been under fire for 4 days. He hadn't slept. He was shaking uncontrollably. Patton entered the tent, saw Bennett trembling on the cot. "What's wrong with this man?" "Battle nerves, sir." Patton's jaw tightened. "Your nerves, hell. You're just a goddamn coward." He slapped Bennett across the face, twice. Then he drew his pistol, pointed it at the soldier. "You ought to be lined up against a wall and shot." A colonel physically stepped between them. Patton holstered his weapon and walked away. Neither soldier ever forgot that moment. Neither did anyone who witnessed it. And here's what nobody tells you about what happened next. Eisenhower found out. And instead of firing Patton immediately, he made a decision that would change everything. General Eisenhower received the report 3 days after the second incident. He sat alone with it for an hour. Then he wrote Patton a letter. Not an official reprimand. A personal letter. He wrote that he was shocked, that the behavior was inexcusable, that Patton owed those soldiers an apology. But he did not relieve him of command. Not yet. Eisenhower believed Patton was the best tank commander in the war, possibly the best general alive. And relieving him now in the middle of the Sicily campaign could cost thousands of lives. So Eisenhower chose a different path. He ordered Patton to apologize, personally, to the soldiers he had slapped, to the doctors and nurses who witnessed it, and to every unit under his command. Patton was furious. He wrote in his diary, "I may have saved my soul, but I am not sure I have saved my career." He made the apologies, standing before his troops, thousands of men, telling them he had been wrong. For a man like Patton, it was the hardest thing he had ever done in uniform. But here's where the story changes. Because 3 months later, in November 1943, a war correspondent named Drew Pearson went on American national radio and told the world what Patton had done. The reaction was immediate, massive, unprecedented. By the end of the week, Washington was drowning in letters, 3,000 of them, all addressed to the War Department, many addressed to Patton himself. And nobody was prepared for what those letters said. Because the letters weren't what anyone expected. They weren't all calling for Patton's head. Some of them were. But others were something completely different. Patton received the letters in batches. His aide brought them to his quarters in England, where he had been quietly reassigned after Sicily. No command, no soldiers, no battle. Just Patton, alone in a country house, waiting to find out if his career was over. The first batch of letters was predictable. Outrage, disgust, demands for his court-martial, demands for his dismissal. Some called him a monster. Others called him unfit to lead. Congressman Andrew May of Kentucky publicly called for Patton's removal. Patton read them all, his face expressionless. Then came the second batch. These were different. A mother from Ohio wrote, "My son was in your command. He told me you slapped a soldier. He also told me you drove into the front lines when generals stayed back, that you visited every hospital, that you knew his name. I don't know what to think about the slapping, but I know my son is alive. And I think that's partly because of you." Patton read it twice, put it down, picked it up again. A veteran of the First World War wrote, "I've seen shell shock, I've seen cowardice. They're not the same thing. But I've also seen officers who would never slap a private and never win a battle either. I don't know which you are, but I hope they don't get rid of you. A soldier from Patton's own command wrote, "Sir, I watched you visit our unit 3 days before the slapping incident. You shook hands with every man. You remembered details about their families. You cared about us in a way most generals don't. I don't know why you did what you did, but I know you're not a bad man, and I think you know that too." Patton read that one and sat quietly for a long time. The third batch was the one nobody talked about publicly. Letters from soldiers who had suffered from battle fatigue. Men who understood exactly what Private Cool had been going through. One of them wrote, "General Patton, I was evacuated from the front in North Africa for the same condition as the soldier you slapped. I couldn't function. I couldn't stop shaking. I wasn't a coward. I just broke. When I heard what you did to him, I was angry. I'm still angry. But I also want you to know something. After I recovered, I went back to the front. I fought until the end. I wasn't a coward then either. Maybe that soldier you slapped will do the same. Maybe he needed what you gave him. Maybe he needed something else entirely. I don't know. But I thought you should know that we're not all cowards. And I thought you might need to hear that from someone like me." Patton read that letter, and for the first time in the entire scandal, he cried. Alone in his quarters in England, reading a letter from a broken soldier who had somehow found the strength to write to the man who had publicly humiliated everything the soldier had gone through. What Patton did next surprised everyone who knew him. He wrote back, not a form letter, not a press release, a personal response. He wrote, "You are right. I was wrong about what I thought I saw. I have since learned that what I called cowardice has a different name, and I am not certain I would have survived what you survived. I cannot take back what I did. But I can tell you that I have thought about it every day since, and I will think about it every day I have remaining. You are not a coward. You never were. G.S. Patton." He wrote similar letters to 30 other men who had written to him directly, not to save his career. His career was already uncertain. But because the letters had done something he hadn't expected, they had made him understand something he had missed. Private Charles Cool, the first soldier Patton slapped, was interviewed after the war. He said something remarkable. "I don't think Patton was a bad man. I think he didn't understand what was happening to me. And honestly, I'm not sure anyone did back then." He paused. "I'll tell you something, though. After everything that happened, I actually felt sorry for him. He was trying to win a war. He just didn't know that some of his soldiers were fighting a different kind of battle." Private Paul Bennett, the second soldier, said less publicly. But in a private letter to his family, written in 1947, he wrote, "Patton apologized to me personally. He looked me in the eye. He said he was wrong. I believed him. That doesn't mean what he did was right, but it means he was human, and so am I." Patton was never court-martialed. Eisenhower kept him. He went on to command the Third Army. He liberated more territory in less time than any other commander in the war. But he also changed. Not completely, not always, but he changed. In his diary, after reading the letters, he wrote, "I have always believed that war required hard men making hard decisions. I still believe that. But I have learned this week that hardness and cruelty are not the same thing, and that I confuse them. I do not know if I can fully correct what I am, but I know now what I need to correct." The slapping incident followed Patton for the rest of his life. At every press conference, every introduction, every mention of his name, he never denied it, never minimized it, never pretended it didn't happen. When asked about it directly, he always said the same thing. "I was wrong. I have always known I was wrong." The only question worth asking is what a man does after he is wrong. The 3,000 letters were eventually archived in the national records. Some of them are still there today, including the one from the soldier who had suffered from battle fatigue, and including Patton's handwritten response. Kept together, filed side by side, the letter from the broken soldier and the response from the man who had broken him. And somehow, between those two pieces of paper, more humanity than in most military records ever written. If you had been one of those soldiers, would you have written to Patton? And if you had been Patton, what would you have done with those letters? Let us know in the comments. And if you want more World War II stories that show the truth behind the legend, make sure to subscribe. You're in Patton's army now.